Acquiring a business? BizNexus simplifies it. Access thousands of updated opportunities in our DIY marketplace or supercharge team sourcing with OmniSource, your all-in-one platform for on-market, off-market, and coming-soon deals. Scale smarter today. Learn more or book a demo at www.biznexus.com.
Disclaimer from the always present legal team. Podcast conversations don't necessarily reflect the views of BizNexus Incorporated. Everything you hear is informational news and updates from around the industry. We're not recommending any investments. We're not offering any investment advice. Be sure to do your own homework.
All right, so today we're going to dive into something pretty interesting happening in the middle market.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at, how technology is impacting the valuations of middle market companies.
Yeah.
And how that's playing into, how they're being acquired.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we've got some really good insights from Brent Mathews.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's a real expert in this space.
Yeah.
He's been providing debt financing for acquisitions for the last 15 years and focusing primarily on that lower end of the middle market. So, companies under $5 million in EBITDA since 2017.
Gotcha.
He's got a wealth of experience from over 100 closed deals. So
Wow. So he's seen a lot.
he's seen it all, yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that Matthews points out that's really fascinating is that the whole landscape is kind of changing.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, before this, big tech-focused buyers in the middle market, they're mostly looking at ways to improve a company's operations, right?
Makes sense.
So things like, tightening up the accounting practices,
Yeah.
getting costs under control, better sales and marketing, maybe expanding geographically.
Look at the nuts and bolts stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those growth projections, back then they were usually pretty conservative, maybe around 10% year over year.
Right. Steady growth.
Steady as she goes.
Yeah.
And anything more ambitious,
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking for rapid growth, you would typically need different kinds of financing to make that happen.
Makes sense. They wanted to manage that debt carefully, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all about that reliable growth to keep things sustainable.
Right.
But Matthew says that the story is very different now.
Oh, so what's changed?
Well, with all this promise of technology,
Yeah.
Matthew specifically mentions AI, outsourced coding, plug-and-play APIs, all that.
Yeah, it's all the rage now, right?
It is. And it's causing buyers to, they're forecasting much higher future revenue and EBITDA for these companies.
So instead of that slow and steady growth, they're thinking big.
Big, yeah, dramatic growth, not just those small gains.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, so, this whole shift brings up some really important questions.
Like what?
Well, Matthews asks, will buyers, maybe those with real tech expertise or maybe even those who just think they have it, will they start to overpay for these middle market companies that maybe don't have huge profit margins right now, or maybe their systems are a bit outdated, but they have this potential for, this big tech transformation?
I see. So they're betting on the future, not necessarily the present.
Exactly. And that raises a really interesting point for those traditional value-focused buyers in the middle market.
Yeah.
The ones who've always looked at the fundamentals.
Yeah, how do they adapt to this new landscape where tech-driven growth is, potentially the main driver of a company's value?
Yeah, it's a big question.
For sure.
Now, what I find really valuable about Matthew's perspective is that, it's not all just theory. He's been in the trenches. He's got all this real-world experience in the middle market.
You're right. He's not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And he shares 3 key observations that I think are really worth highlighting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Well, first off, he says, and this is something I think we all know to be true, but all projections, whether they're optimistic or pessimistic, they end up being inaccurate in some way.
Yeah, that's life, right?
It is. But his second point is really important. He says that implementing technology in these middle market companies, it almost always ends up costing more and taking longer than anyone initially planned for.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to underestimate the complexity.
Exactly. And, that outsourced coding that seemed like such a good idea on paper, it might not be as smooth as it seems.
Right. There's always unforeseen challenges.
Always. And then his third point is, he emphasizes that in today's business environment, which is constantly changing, especially in the middle market. If you
Yeah.
don't invest and you don't adapt, you're going to get left behind.
It's survival of the fittest out there.
It really, so, for our listeners out there, you might be thinking, why should I care about all this?
Yeah.
How is this relevant to me? Well, regardless of whether you're directly involved in acquisitions or not, this whole thing shows just how deeply technology is influencing business, even in those sectors that you wouldn't traditionally think of as being super tech-driven.
Right. It's not just Silicon Valley anymore.
Definitely not. And it also highlights just how dynamic the whole concept of a company's worth is.
Yeah.
It's not static.
Right. It forces us to really think about what truly drives value.
Yeah.
Is it the current state of a business, or is it the potential that technology brings?
Exactly. And can that, that allure of future tech,
Right.
can that sometimes overshadow the realities of the present? What's actually happening on the ground in the middle market?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And so it all comes down to this, we're seeing this really interesting tension play out.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, you've got all this excitement about the transformative potential of technology, how it can revolutionize these middle market companies.
Yeah, everyone wants to find the next big thing.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, you have the realities of implementation, which, as Mathews points out, can be complex. It can be expensive. It can be time consuming.
It's not as simple as flipping a switch.
Not at all. And so this brings us to a final question for our listeners to ponder.
What's that?
Given all this uncertainty around implementing technology, how should investors and business owners really balance that promise of future potential with the current fundamentals of a business, when they're looking at acquiring a company in the middle market?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You don't want to get caught up in the hype, but you also don't want to miss out on a good opportunity.
Exactly. It's a real balancing act, and it's something that I think everyone needs to be thinking about as this whole landscape continues to evolve.
All right.
So yeah, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the middle market. It's a fascinating topic and one that I think we'll be revisiting in the future.
Definitely looking forward to it.
All right, until next time,
See ya.
take care.
Bye-bye.
Thinking of exiting your business or taking on a private equity partner to help you grow faster? BizNexus has you covered. Tap into our network of thousands of best-fit investors, acquirers, and proven M&A advisors, and we'll help you begin the relationship confidentially on your terms, your timeline. Learn more at biznexus.com.